Okay guys, welcome back to Gary's Economics. This week we've got something a little bit different for you. We are going to show you a live recording of a speech I gave at Cambridge to kick off my book launch a couple of months ago. I got to be honest, if we've gotten around to this point, it means basically we have run out of videos. And the reason for that is because I am currently on holiday cycling from Tokyo to Kagoshima in southwestern Japan. Listen, it's been a pretty mental year for me. I've been working really hard, channel's grown a lot. I've had a ton of publicity with the book, trying to grow everything, trying to push things politically, and it's been a lot of work. And to be honest, I'm feeling a little bit creatively exhausted. And we get a lot of support for this channel now. I've got a manager and we've got Jack here, the videographer, but creatively it's still basically me who does the videos. And with all the book and the interviews and the videos for the channel, I'm feeling a bit knackered, and the election, all that nonsense. So I've decided to get out of here, go back to Japan. Those of you who've read the book will know I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I used to spend a lot of time in there before COVID. So I've decided to take a little bit of a break, go and do this cycle that I've wanted to do for ages, from Tokyo to southwest Japan. And I've tried my best to film videos to fill the gap, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover the whole time. And we've scheduled this to be the last video before we go blank for a bit, maybe for part of August, before I come back from my holiday. And this is a speech I gave at Robinson College in Cambridge. It's a little bit more personal, a little bit more emotional than a lot of the stuff that I do. Talking about sort of how I deal with sort of living in this economy where things get worse and worse, and trying to stop it. I think it's a really nice speech, and I promised a room full of Scousers in Waterstones, Liverpool, that I'd put it up on the YouTube at some point, so hopefully they're still watching. Unfortunately, there's a few problems with the sound quality, but since we've got a gap with no videos, I think it's worth watching. I think it's really interesting. It's about 45 minutes long. I hope you like it. I get a little bit emotional in it, but after this, I think we'll probably have a gap of a few weeks before I come back in September and start shooting again. So this will be it for me for a few weeks. I'll be back, and I hope you enjoy this last video. Thank you. And also thanks for all of your help this year. The growth's been really good and been really mental, and hopefully we'll be able to have a little bit more political impact when I come back. Thank you. When I was contacted to do this lecture, they said, come to Robinson College, talk about economics. Tell everyone why inequality is a problem. And my agent said, that's perfect timing for your book launch, go do it. So I said yes, and that's about a year ago now. I didn't really think about it much. Then they reached out to me a couple of months ago and they said, what do you want the title of your lecture to be? And my first thought when they said that was, I don't really want to talk about economics anymore. Let me explain to you why. I've been talking about economics for a long time now. 13 years, 14 years, I've been having arguments about economics, trying to tell people inequality is a problem, inequality is a problem. It's going to get worse, it's going to get worse, we need to do something. And over the course of those 14 years, especially in the last year or two, what I've noticed is the arguments that I've been having have been changing. And more I start to think to myself that actually, we're not really arguing about economics at all. See, when I first started saying inequality was a problem, I was working in a bank in Canary Wharf in London. And I was surrounded by millionaires with economics degrees, and they would say to me, you can't tax wealth, you can't deal with inequality, because we need the rich to invest to grow the economy. The optimal rate of taxation in the first best of all possible worlds on capital is 0. But nobody really says that to me anymore. Okay, some people do say that sometimes in places like this, people say that, but nobody without a fancy economics degree says that to me no more. What people say to me now is, you can't tax the rich. You can't tax. They're too powerful. You tax the rich, they'll leave and they'll go away and then we'll have nothing and then we'll be poor. Or they say to me, it's impossible trying to deal with inequality. Inequality is just the way things are. And the rich are too powerful. Why are you trying to stop them? You're wasting your time. Or they say to me, why are you trying to stop inequality? Why don't you just trade Bitcoin or foreign exchange on the internet? That's the way to make everything better. Or they say to me, you know, the economy and society, it's like the cycles of nature. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it gets better and sometimes it gets worse. So why are you trying to change things? You can't fight the cycles of nature. And the more I heard these arguments, the more I started to think, we're not really arguing about the economy. Increasingly, everybody knows it's getting worse and worse. Really, hardly any real people think it's going to get better. I think people in their heart of hearts realize that it just gets worse and worse from here. And when they're saying to me, why are you trying to fix things? Often they're really saying to themselves, I don't want to have to try to fix things. And I started to feel like the real questions that we're asking ourselves and each other, it's not really, is the economy broken? It's what do you do? What do you do when you live in a collapsing economy? What do you do? What should you do? And what does it mean? And more, these are the questions that I hear when I argue with people about economics. What do you do? What should you do? What does it mean? And it got me thinking about my journey in economics. I've been an economist for, nearly 20 years now. But I lived in an economy my whole life. I grew up very poor, so really poverty and a collapsing economy is not new to me. But it got me thinking, what did I do? What should I have done differently? What does it all mean? So I sent a mail back saying I wanted to talk about what it means to be human in a collapsing economy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think about my path. And when I talk about that, I want you to think about those three main questions. What does it mean to live in a collapsing economy? What do you do when the economy is collapsing? And what should you do? And I'm going to stop at points and I'm going to ask those questions. And when I do that, I would like you to think, what would I do if that was me? And with regards to the second of those questions, what do you do when the economy is collapsing? All of you will have a perspective on that because you all live in a collapsing economy and you're all doing something. But this kind of economic collapse, which is in my opinion a collapse caused by inequality, it's a collapse which looks very, very different depending on which angle you view it from. So some of you will have been in the situations I've been in and some of you won't have been. But I want you to take it as an opportunity to imagine you're in a different seat to where you are now. And ask yourself honestly, what would I do if that was me? Okay, so with that, I'm going to start. I don't really like reading from speeches, but I've written a little story. When I was writing, I wanted to start with my period of poverty, which lasted about 20 years. And I wrote a little bit about Ilford, which is my hometown, so I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to have to change this first line because there's a swear word in it. I grew up in Ilford. It's a bit of a slum, but it's my slum. Ilford is kind of a contested borderland war zone between East London and Essex. Everyone is from Pakistan or India or Sri Lanka or something, but everyone talks in a half Cockney accent. When I was a teenager, I used to sing songs in Punjabi for illegal immigrants working in halal fried chicken shops at 2 a.m. in the morning for free chicken. What do you want me to tell you?
I loved it. I still do. I miss it. Ilford is one of the cheapest places to live in all of London. I used to live in this tiny, narrow, terraced house on a street full of tiny, narrow, terraced houses, tucked in behind the high street. It had 3 bedrooms. It used to have 2 bedrooms, but somebody had moved the bathroom downstairs into the kitchen, which meant that they could turn the old bathroom upstairs into another bedroom. And that's where I grew up, in a bunk bed with my brother. In a bunk bed in an old converted bathroom. The train tracks that carried brokers and traders in fast trains from out in Essex down into the city used to run right through my garden, right past my bedroom window. And when the fast trains came through, the whole house used to shake. But I never noticed. When you grow up in a house that gets shaken by a fast train every 4 minutes, you don't even notice when a train shakes your house. I was 12 or 13 the first time I noticed. My friend from school came around and he said, "Damn, your whole house is shaking." And that was the first time I realized. What does that mean? So I was in the bottom bunk of that bunk bed when I was a kid. And underneath my bed, there was a single drawer that had been removed from a chest of drawers, which had probably been destroyed long ago. And in that single drawer, I kept all of my worldly possessions. I'll be honest, it wasn't a particularly safe house when I was a kid. There was danger and there was violence sometimes. But, I was a kid. What do you do? And there are a lot of institutions in our society that are supposed to protect poor kids and kids who are not safe. There's the government, the welfare state, charity, philanthropy, some religious institutions. All I can tell you is, I don't remember none of them coming for me. So, what do you do? There wasn't any help as far as I can remember it when I was a kid. But there was a story. A story is something to hold on to. You work hard. You kill all of your exams. You destroy the competition. Your friends, of course. You beat all your friends into the top university. This university. And then you get a whole load of new friends. And you beat those new friends too into the best job. And then you get the best job, working for a bank in the city. I didn't really know what that meant, to be honest. But I had an image. It was an image of a large corner office, high up in a skyscraper somewhere, with carpeted floors and windows for walls, and a high blue sky and a warm sun, and views for miles in every direction. I don't actually know if offices like that really exist. I never worked in one. But that was a story. I got to be honest, I didn't really work hard. There wasn't anywhere to work in my house. The only desk in the whole house was this little kind of bureau thing that you had to fold out right next to my dad's bed, and when you did, a whole load of moths flew at you. It was so dark and musty there that I don't think anyone could work there. But my parents had a solution. They got this plank of wood, and if you sat on the armchair, you could put the plank of wood across, and you could balance your books and you could write there. But I didn't really like doing that because the plank wasn't that long and it would fall and your books would fall on the floor. So I just went down to the floor with them and I put the plank down on the floor and I used to work there, lying down on my belly in the middle of the front room, doing my maths homework and my French homework, as my dad used to watch Coronation Street and my brother and sister used to run around screaming and causing carnage. What do you do, I didn't work hard. Instead, I was out on the streets. My street was like a little dead-end street, tucked in between the high street and the railway. And on one end where there was this old abandoned factory we used to play in. And on the other end, there was this recycling centre, which had these huge 3-metre high piles of old newspapers. We used to play on them as well. But there was never any traffic on that street, and the kids used to just play out every day. And when the first Canary Wharf skyscrapers went up, which was happening when I was about 9 or 10, we could see those skyscrapers go up in the distance. And so I thought, that's it then. That's where I'm going to be. Looks like a lot of corner offices in that building. Maybe some other kids thought the same. But I wasn't really studying. But you might think that's a problem, but to be honest, it weren't. Because even though I weren't never studying, I still came first in every exam. And I don't know why. I don't know what that means. And the kids at school would say, oh, we know you're studying. And I would say, I'm not studying. And they would say, we know that you are. And I don't know what you say to that. So I used to take them sometimes back to see my house. The house I used to shake with the trains. And then they knew that I wasn't studying. Because I wasn't. Not long after that, I got expelled from school. See, I managed to get into some fancy grammar school, and the kids there knew that I could get drugs. And they were right. I could get drugs. There were drugs on my street. There was about 10 houses I could have knocked on at any time. And those front doors would open up and they'd sell me drugs. And those kids at the grammar school from fancy homes and fancy houses and staircases that split in two in the middle, they didn't have doors that opened up like that on their streets. But what they did have was money. Money. So they brought their money that I didn't have, and I brought my drugs, which they didn't have. And we met then in bounteous free commerce. And it wasn't them, it was me that got expelled, wasn't it? And I didn't know quite what that meant. What would you do? When I was very young, primary school, I had a school trip to the seaside. At that time, I owned 2 pairs of shoes. One was a pair of black school shoes that were a hand-me-down from my older brother. I wore those to school and to church. I also had 1 pair of black plimsolls, also a hand-me-down from my brother. I wore those for everything else. That day on the seaside, I took off my plimsolls and I ran into the sea and I played in the waves. And when I came back to the shore, the plimsolls were gone. I guess the waves must have taken them. After that, I wore the black school shoes for everything. PE class, everything. I wore them until they fell apart. I don't know. What would you do? And now this brings us to our first moral question. At this point, we see in sharp moral focus the meaning of what it is to be poor and to try to be rich. So imagine this. You are there for the first day of your new life. You're 16, you've just been expelled from school. In the night time, you were awoken by your mother crying at the foot of your bed. But she's gone now. Everyone's gone now. Your mum and your dad and your brother are at work. Your younger sister, she's still in school. There's no one in the house and there's no school to go to. So you get out of bed and you go downstairs to the bathroom, which is in the kitchen, and you plug a little plastic hose into the taps of the bathtub and you sit down on the cold plastic and you shower yourself and you watch the water go down the drain and you say to yourself, that's your life, that is. That's your life. And then you get out of the bath and you dry yourself and you're drying your hair and the doorbell rings. And it's your friend from the street who you've been smoking with for about 6 months now. And he knows that you've been expelled from school and he's really sorry. And he says we should go and smoke up. So now, what do? This is the moment when you realize that to be poor and to want to be rich is a walking away. It is a walking away from the friends you grew up with. It is a walking away from people like you. And you know deep within yourself, in your heart of hearts, these friends won't be okay without you. But what about you? If you stick around to save him, then who sticks around to save you? What does it mean to be selfish? What would you do if it were you? What would you do? I didn't go. I worked. I worked there by myself in that cold, empty house, belly down in the center of the front room. Maths homework, chemistry homework, English homework, every day on that small wooden board. And I did it. I killed my exams. I decimated the opposition. I outcompeted my friends. I won. Then, my first taste of blood. So what next? 3 years later, the London School of Economics. Money. So I'll be honest, I thought LSE was going to be difficult, but to be honest, it wasn't that hard. Millionaires' kids, Gaddafi's kids, paying tens of thousands of pounds to send their kids over to London from all over the world to get beat by me in their exams. I don't know why, to be honest. I don't really know what that means. But I had a desk then. Not a home here, but there was a desk in the library. So now you're at LSE. You're 19 years old. You're studying maths and economics, which is basically the same as economics, because economics is mostly maths nowadays. Your focus now is on smashing the other students, killing them in their exams, making it clear to everyone that you are the best student in the uni and beating everyone to the top job that will make you a millionaire. Everyone else is trying to do the same thing. Nobody's really that bothered in trying to work out how the economy works. Why would we be? We didn't go there to do that. We were there to kill, to compete, to make money. It's not about knowledge. Was that the right thing to do? Should you spend your time actually trying to understand the economy and let everyone else beat you in your exams? Then you'll never be able to get a job to actually do anything with that knowledge. I don't know. What would you do? Now, I made my decision pretty quickly, and I killed everyone in the first year exams. And I thought that was the right path to getting me a millionaire job, but it turns out it wasn't. Because whilst grades are important to getting the top jobs nowadays, other things are more important. The actual way you get a good job nowadays is sending a CV and cover letter. So what do you put on your CV and cover letter when you're 19 years old? You've been expelled from school for selling drugs. You did a paper round for 6 years. You spent 3 years fluffing pillows in a sofa shop in Beckton next to a sewage work. You spent 1.5 years trying to become a grime MC. My friend was head of the Junior United Nations. My other friend played oboe at the Royal Albert Hall. He founded a charity that runs dirt bike tours through the Sahara Desert for some reason. Why were their CVs so much better than mine? They were better because they knew. More likely, their parents had known. They had known that the day would come when the children of this world would be divided based on who and who could not play the oboe. So they made sure that their kids had oboes. And that's how jobs are allocated in this world. It's not about exams. I see that now. What does that mean? What do you do? Okay, so you need to find a new route. You need to sneak in through the back door despite the fact that your grades are the best in the whole university. You look for a back door and you find one. Competition, a card game. One bank runs a card game across 5 universities in the country. The winner of the whole competition gets an internship. A game. Sounds nice. It sounds fair, doesn't it? Sounds like you don't need to play the oboe at least. But it's risky, isn't it? It's a game. So what you do some research and you manage to find out the rules of the game before the competition itself. Then when you walk into the competition against the other wealthy economic students, you win, at least partially because you had an advantage, an unfair advantage. You cheated, in a sense. You cheated to win. What does that mean? You cheated to win a game that you needed to win in order to get a job, despite being one of the top students in the whole university. What does that mean? Is that fair? Is that human? What would you do? Okay, so now you get the job. Now you're a trader. The best job in the world. There's no corner office. It's a big room. It's the job everybody wanted. You get to the trading floor of one of the world's biggest banks, and it's full of genius millionaires. Except it's not really, is it? It's full of men with nice shirts, expensive haircuts. It's kind of full of obvious psychopaths with emotional problems and people who shout a lot and aren't really that smart. And you suppose that should have been obvious, really, because it's full of the same people you studied with at LSE, and they were never really chosen because they were smart. They were chosen because their dads were rich. What does that mean? So you're there now. You're young and you're hungry and you're there to make money and you want to learn from someone. You want to learn how to trade, how to make money, but everyone there is kind of insane. And then suddenly, it's October 2008, and the world blows up, and Lehman goes bankrupt, and 7 of your friends who studied with you at the London School of Economics and had only just started working there lose their jobs. And TV cameras go down to their office, which is just down the road from your office, and your friends pack all their personal possessions into little green Lehman Brothers duffel bags that they'd received just a couple weeks earlier as a welcome gift for managing to get one of the best jobs in the entire world. And they carry those little green duffel bags and cardboard boxes full of their possessions down into taxis, and down to the station, and TV cameras film them, and you see them on TV. And you feel bad for them because you know them, because you study with them. But you don't feel bad for them, really, because you know they should have chosen better when they got randomly assigned a bank, just like you. What does that mean? What would you do? And everyone around you starts to make money. 2 traders in my team of traders made $100 million in profit the year Lehman went under. So what do? I know what I did. I started to copy them, even though I had no idea what any of them were doing. And the next year, I made $12 million in profit. But that year, there was a lot of public discontent about the pay and the bankers' bonuses. The bankers who, in their eyes, had ruined the global economy. And I sat there on the trading floor. And I was still a poor boy, sleeping on broken mattresses, still showering with a hose in my parents' bathtub, only now surrounded by millionaires. As Gordon Brown, the then Prime Minister of my country, said he would tax the bankers. He would tax their bonuses. And I looked around, and the millionaires around me were laughing. And one of them grabbed my shoulder and he said, "Don't worry, Gary. They'll never tax us." And I took a big breath in and I breathed it all out. What does that mean? What would you do? I waited for my first big bonus. I was expecting it to be £100,000. At that time in my life, £100,000 was the biggest sum of money that I could imagine. My dad had worked his whole life for £20,000 a year. What I got was £395,000. What does that mean? What would you do? You know, when I was in 6th form, I would skip lunch to save money. My friend Assad would sometimes feel bad for me, and he'd buy me a burger meal from a shop called Pizza King around the corner from the school, and I'd have it with burger sauce. You know, that orange sauce. When I was at uni for lunch, I would buy 2 Scotch eggs from Tesco for 75p every day for 2 years. And then one day, when I had just turned 23, someone gave me £395,000. What does that mean? What would you do? I wanted more. The next year, 2010, I copied everyone again and it didn't work. For the first time ever, I lost money. I lost $8 million in one single week when the Swiss National Bank unexpectedly cut its interest rates to negative 4.5%. That was the first time ever that it occurred to me that maybe LSE had done me a disservice. Maybe memorizing answers and not actually learning anything wasn't really that useful. Maybe you did need to know about the economy after all. Who knew? But that moment began an obsession for me. An obsession that continues today. An obsession to understand the economy. Why did I want to understand the economy? Because I wanted to make money. What does that mean? What would you do? So around about that time, late 2010, early 2011, I was starting to understand that nobody had any idea what they were doing. See, my job was to predict interest rates. To summarize quite aggressively, interest rates go down when the economy is weak and up when the economy is strong. By the beginning of 2011, I had witnessed markets predict interest rates completely incorrectly for 3 years. See, cutting interest rates to zero is supposed to stimulate the economy. That's what we are taught at university. Due to the massive interest rate cuts in 2008, economists all expected the economy to bounce back sharply in 2009. It didn't. After that, economists expected the same thing to happen in 2010. It didn't. I didn't know it at the time, but this pattern would actually continue for 13 years. Economists in the UK predicted economic and interest rate recovery every single year from 2009 to 2020. In 2020, they finally agreed that interest rates would actually never go up again. What does that mean? Anyway, look, I didn't know this at that time. All I knew then was that the traders and the economists had been wrong for 3 years. They were predicting economic recoveries that weren't happening. Why? In my opinion, the reason those traders and economists thought the economy would get better every single year from 2008 up till now is because for them, it did get better. For the rich, life got better and better and better pretty much every single year from 2008 up till now. So why did interest rates stay at zero that whole decade after 2010? I had an idea. The reason interest rates are supposed to stimulate the economy is because they're supposed to get you spending. But people weren't spending. And I asked a few of the traders why, and they said, there's problems with the banking sector which are fixed now. There's problems with confidence that are fixed now. One time I asked an Oxford economics professor, why did you think spending was so weak after 2008? He said there was an exogenous shock to consumption savings preferences. So I decided to do something radical in the world of economics. I went out and I started asking people, have you had an exogenous shock to your consumption savings preferences? I'm going to read you a passage from my book because my publicist will be delighted. This is what people said when I asked them why they weren't spending more money. I asked Harry Samby. Harry was still just a kid. Harry had holes in his shoes and he was jumping over the barriers on the tube to save costs. That's why he didn't spend money. I asked Assad. Assad said his mum had sold the family home to support him and his sisters. And now he was sleeping on the sofa to try and save up a deposit. That's why they didn't spend money. I asked Aidan. Aidan's mum had lost her job and hadn't been able to get a new rate on the mortgage. Now the monthly payments were sky high, and Aidan was having to pay them himself. That's why they didn't spend money. They were losing their homes. I hadn't even noticed. So you realize that the hundreds of billions of pounds being poured into the economy by governments and central banks aren't doing anything to protect ordinary people. Very shortly after that, you recognize that basically every government in the world is bankrupt. Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, but also the UK, the US, Japan. At that time, early 2011, all of these governments had massive deficits that were growing. They were selling off their assets. They were going into debt. They were losing their homes. But if the government is losing its assets and going into debt, and the people are losing their assets and going into debt, then where are the assets going? And who's on the other side of the debt? Then I looked to the right of me, and I looked to the left of me, and I realized I was surrounded by millionaires. It was us, wasn't it? We were the balance. We were the boys who would be richer than our fathers in a world full of kids who'd be poor. It was us. We were the ones on the other side of the Italian government debt. We were the ones on the other side of Aidan's mum's mortgage. We would buy Assad's mum's house and rent it back to Assad's kids, and then we would have the house and the debt too. We'd lend it back to them, and it would grow and it would grow and it would compound and it would compound. The situation wouldn't get better. It would get worse. It wasn't confidence. It was cancer. It was never going to get better. What does that mean? I knew what it meant. It meant I had to buy green Eurodollar futures. Now, that's a bet on interest rates. At that time, everybody thought interest rates would go up, but they wouldn't. I put that bet on in massive size, and by the end of the year, I was Citibank's most profitable trader in the world. And Citibank paid me $2 million and said, well done, mate. Do it again. But what does that mean? What would you do? I did it one more year, I am not going to lie to you. The next year, I was sitting at my desk, and I said to one of the young traders who I worked with, do you think we should do something? He said to me, what do you mean? I said, do you think we should do something about the collapsing economy? He said, what do you mean? I said, do you think we should do something? He said, we bought the green Eurodollars. What do you want? I said to him, I don't think this is about the green Eurodollars, you know. Do you think we should do something about the collapsing economy? He said to me, sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean? I tried to explain to him that maybe we, as wealthy people with an understanding of the problematic economy, should do something to make it better. He said to me, Gary, that's impossible. And I knew, of course, that he was right. But for some reason, I quit my job anyway. And I would love to tell you it's because I'm a good person, because I'm a nice guy. But the truth is, it's because I was sick. I wanted to sit there and make more money. But I was losing weight every single day. I'd bought a new luxury apartment and I'd ripped all of the furnishings out. For some reason, I couldn't buy more. And I used to sleep on a mattress on a bare concrete floor with white plaster walls. And every day I'd trade $1 trillion and be Citibank's most profitable trader in the world. And what does that mean? I quit that job, and if you want to hear the story of that, it's in the book. But I want to talk about what happened afterwards. Because first I tried to work for a think tank. And I made a website called Wealth Economics. It's still up. You can look at it if you want. Explaining that if you don't fix wealth inequality, the economy will collapse. This theory made me millions of dollars. Yeah, nobody looked at the website. You can still look at it if you want. But of course, nobody's going to look at the website. Nobody knows who you are. So what do? So you go back to university. You go back to university, you go to Oxford, right? Best university in the world. Oh, contentious. And you go to your first lecture on interest rates. And at this point, you've just stopped being the world's most profitable interest rates trader. And you go to the lecturer and you say, hey, can we talk about why we've been so wrong about interest rates for the past 10 years? And he says to you, oh, we always knew interest rates would stay zero. What does that mean? And you say to him, no, you didn't. You predicted it wrong for 10 years in a row. And he says, no, we knew. And you say to him, okay, well, I'll go home and I'll send you the data. And he says, oh, yeah, you're right. You were wrong for 10 years. And it don't go no further. What does that mean? And you go to your mid-year review and you sit there with your college professors and they ask you, what do you think of the course? You tell them it's not very good. Maybe use some stronger words. I've been asked not to swear in this lecture. And they say, why don't you like it? And I say, why don't you talk about people's economic problems? And they turn around to you and they say, what do you mean? The economy is good. And you sit there with these three men in capes in this wood-panelled hall and you hear these two unspoken words reverberate back from the walls. It's good for us. What does that mean? So you decide you have to leave university and you have to try and do something more active. You have to go out and you have to speak to people directly. You have to tell them if things don't get better, if there's no action on inequality, that their lives are going to get worse and worse. Then immediately there's a pandemic and the government gives out £800 billion. And you can see from the analysis right at the beginning that that money will be accumulated by the rich. And nobody at the universities, in the opposition party, in the government, in the civil service, in the central banks, even asked the question of who's going to accumulate this $800 billion. So you put a massive bet on increasing asset prices and you make £300,000. What does that mean? But you also make a YouTube channel when you try and tell people this is going to happen. You write in The Guardian that there's going to be a massive crisis of inequality and falling living standards. At the same time, Larry Elliott, chief economics correspondent of The Guardian, predicts that house prices will collapse. 3 years later, you were right and Larry Elliott was wrong. But obviously, nobody remembers. What does that mean? And you work and eventually you manage to build up a following. You put up videos every week. And people turn around to you and say, there's no point. There's nothing you can do. There's no way to stop it, so what do? I want to speak to you about an event that I spoke at. It was at Saatchi, I probably can't mention. It was at a fancy advertising company. You can edit that out, right? And I sat on the stage and I told him in a much shorter version what I just told you, that the economy will collapse and it will get worse and worse. I'm not just saying that, I'm betting on it. I make hundreds of thousands of pounds on it every year. I've made millions of pounds on it in my life. And the woman next to you, who by all accounts seems like a very nice woman, says, what gives me hope is that the economy is like nature. Sometimes it gets better and sometimes it gets worse. And what I heard when she said that was, my life's comfortable. I ain't going to do nothing. And you start thinking it's impossible, isn't it? Because the poor are struggling to put food on the table. You expect them to stand up and defend themselves? And the rich have got kitchen renovations to worry about. So they're too busy to help. The problem is, people are inherently selfish, right? Maybe there's no way out. Maybe this is just inevitable. It's the way that works in society. And then I got sent to do a story in Colburn, which is in Northern Yorkshire. It was about how Rishi Sunak is the richest MP ever. And I was going to go to a food bank. And I was going to ask them, how do you feel about having the richest ever MP in history? And just coincidentally, it happened that Russia invaded Ukraine the previous weekend before I went up there. And the food bank that I was visiting had been converted into a place to sort the donations that were going to be sent to Ukraine. And it was full of people sorting clothes and medicine and food into different bin bags. And there were 3 guys there with vans that were going to drive the stuff all the way there to Ukraine themselves. And I started asking the people, like, who are these people doing this? And you find out it's the users of the food bank. Or maybe people are inherently selfish after all. There's a story in the Bible. It's called the widow's mite. And it talks about all the people who give money extravagantly to charity, to religion. And it talks about one widow who just put 2 small copper coins in the box. And apparently, I never met him, Jesus said, she's given more than everybody else. For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God. But she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had. Maybe people are inherently selfish. I don't know. What do you do? I wanted to read a little bit from a book that I like. It's by an author called Camus. This book is called The Plague, and he talks about what people do in a society that is collapsing. Apparently it's about the Nazis, but I didn't know that because it's a metaphor or something. And what he says is that basically when society collapses, most people go crazy. But some people don't. And there's a group of people that started trying to fight the plague. Camus says, Taru started work the very next day and mustered a first team that was to be followed by many others. However, it is not the narrator's intention to attribute more significance to these health groups than they actually had. It is true that nowadays, many of our fellow citizens would, in his place, succumb to the temptation to exaggerate their role. But the narrator is rather inclined to believe that by giving too much importance to fine actions, one may end by paying an indirect but powerful tribute to evil. Because in so doing, one implies that such fine actions are only valuable because they are rare, and that malice or indifference are far more common motives in the actions of men. The narrator does not share this view. The evil in the world comes almost always from ignorance, and goodwill can cause as much damage as ill will if it is not enlightened. Camus thinks that when you are in a society that is collapsing, your job is to stop it from collapsing. Camus thinks that's how you be human. But there are a lot of people in this town that don't agree, and he speaks about this as well. In Camus' words, a lot of new moralists appeared in the town at this moment, saying that nothing was any use and that we should go down on our knees. Taru, Ryu, and their friends could answer this or that, but the conclusion was always what they knew it would be. One must fight in one way or another and not go down on one's knees. I found that very moving when I read that. But in Camus' story, most people, when society collapses, go crazy. They become extremely religious, or they become extremely hedonistic, or they become extremely greedy and they try to make money. They become really angry and try to find people to hate. And I think this is natural, I think this is what happens when societies collapse. And I don't think we can blame people for doing this, Disaster is a hard thing to face. And look, I see the madness. If you've got a social media platform getting 1,000 comments every day, you see the madness in society. I don't blame people for falling into madness. Some of you will fall into madness too. Maybe you already have done. Into selfishness, into greed, into nihilism. But I can't blame you. It's very human. And society will tell you have a choice in the face of disaster. To turn away, to tell yourself a story that it's not real, that it's not going to happen, that it's only natural, the changing of the seasons. And if you do that, you can probably do what you wanted to do all along. You can be selfish. You can ignore it. You can get that kitchen renovation. And you can tell yourself that the poverty that is growing in society, that the plague that is infecting everybody else, may never darken your door. And you don't have to do what the biblical widow did. You don't have to give everything. In the face of chaos, you have a choice to make, right? You have to choose either yourself or others. You know, I worked in Japan for a couple of years. And at that time, I lost my mind. I fell into a deep depression and I spoke to my Japanese junior. And I told him how watching these millionaires obsess about money as the world collapsed around them made me sick, and how I couldn't eat and how I couldn't sleep. That kid, his name was Kosuke, and his English wasn't good. He said to me, yes, I understand. The problem is these men have very small hearts. You know, sometimes I wonder why it's me up here, from a broken home, broken family, from poverty, struggling often with my mental health, sometimes struggling to get out of bed every day. Sometimes I wonder where all the good kids are, all the nice kids with the nice families that go home to lovely big houses and have lovely meals on lovely dining tables. Where are they? Why is it me here? What are we? What are we as humans? Are we people who have to choose between ourselves and others? Do our hearts have only room for one of these ideas? Or can we be something more? Can we be bigger? Can we be people who care not only for ourselves, our immediate families, us as individuals, but those around us, society as well? Can we fit both of these things into our hearts? Can we take what we need, but also, more than that, after that, find something left to give, even if it's only 2 copper coins? I believe that we can. No, I don't believe that. I believe that we have to. If we don't, the whole thing will collapse. But to finish, I would like to answer the question. For me, and you will have your own opinions, what does it mean to be human in a time of disaster? What does it mean to be human in a collapsing economy? And me personally, I agree with Camus. The job of a human in face of a disaster is to try to prevent that disaster. That's what I'll be trying to do. And I hope you'll try too. Good luck. Thank you.
Well, Gary, that was sensational.